Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another episode. And this week, I'm really excited to have on a repeat guest to the podcast, but it's going to be a different interview. My guest this week is Sarah Korhnak. And those of you who have been around the Etsy Conversations community for a while will remember Sarah from our very first interview when I spoke with her and Bethan of Brilliant Business Moms. Sarah is now doing accounting full-time, which she always was an accountant, and she runs the website Small Business Sarah, and we're going to talk all about accounting and how it relates to Etsy sellers, what you should know and shouldn't do, and all that. So Sarah, thank you so much for being my guest, and welcome back.
I am really excited to be here, Ijama. Thank you so much for having me on your show again.
Oh, you're so welcome. I was so happy when you said yes, because I remember at our first conversation, I had recently just started podcasting, and I had stumbled on yours and Bethan's podcast and your website and your community, and I was just so drawn in. And so I've been a part of your community since then, and for anyone who isn't yet, you need to join the Brilliant Business Moms community. It's fantastic, just a wonderful resource. And so when you broke out to start doing Small Business Sarah, I was like, I need to have her back on, because this is something that is so important to selling on Etsy. And I think it's really important that Etsy sellers get their accounting and just all that bookkeeping stuff straight. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Yes, it is very important. So I hope I can definitely help.
And Sarah, for anyone who doesn't yet know you, can I just have you give a brief introduction about who you are and just what Small Business Sarah is all about?
Sure. So I'm Sarah Korhnak. I'm a wife. I'm a mom to 3 kids. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am an accountant. I have a BS in accounting and passed the CPA exam right after school. And I do have an Etsy shop myself, The Amateur Naturalist. That's been going since 2012, which I initially did start that with my sister. And she's taking over Brilliant Business Moms and I'm taking over The Amateur Naturalist. We kind of had a great way to divide things there. Yeah. So I do have the Etsy shop, The Amateur Naturalist, and last year is when I actually started writing some business ebooks, some blogger's tax guide. I have an Etsy tax guide, and then I started the website, Small Business Sarah, and I guess the goal is just that, to help people figure out their tax and accounting issues and needs as small business owners. Because when I started my small business in 2012, and actually there were a couple little dabbling small businesses before that, I was never afraid of the tax and accounting part of owning a business, because I knew that. But I know that a lot of people really feel terrified or scared about the tax and accounting side of their business. And because of that, they may put it off. And so I guess my website is there to, get people started in the right direction, answer their questions. It's really not as hard as it may seem. And hopefully my website can help people to get started.
Okay, and I will link to smallbusinesssarah.com. If you're listening and you want to go over there right now, it's Small Business Sarah, and there's an H at the end of her name.com. So Sarah, let's talk about some basics when it comes to accounting and bookkeeping for Etsy sellers. First of all, why exactly is it so important to get it right from the very beginning?
Well, it's important to get it right from the beginning because accounting information, or the financial data you get by doing your books or doing your accounting, that information is useful to you when it comes to making decisions for your business. I think a lot of people just think they have to do their accounting or have to do their books because at the end of the year they've got to file their taxes, and that's the only reason to care about your accounting. But really, when you're doing your books and you're looking at your numbers, it's there to help you make decisions that will ultimately help your business grow. So it's not just about tax time. You need to understand that accounting information that you're looking at in your reports, and that can be so useful to you as you grow your business.
Okay. So what do you see are some of the most common mistakes in accounting that Etsy sellers make, or people who run creative businesses in general?
I think what I see most often is, first of all, just ignoring it in the first place. Kind of, they're afraid. So they think if they don't address their accounting or bookkeeping, it'll kind of go away, which it doesn't. So I think that's a huge one. Yes. And honestly, with the accounting programs that are out there today, it's really quite easy. So just kind of, if you know that phrase, eat that frog.
Yeah.
Just getting it over with is important, and a big mistake is delaying that. But the other thing is not keeping your business financials separate from your personal. So when you start a business, it's really important to have a separate bank account and a separate credit card or debit card, whatever you prefer, for your business transactions. Now, sometimes this doesn't have to necessarily be in your business name. When you're first getting started, it's okay to maybe just use a PayPal account, but all of your business money and expenses run through PayPal and your PayPal debit card or something. Or maybe you have like an extra bank account that you're not really using personally. You could start to run all your business transactions through that, and maybe a credit card that you have in your name already that you could use exclusively for your business. That's going to help so much when it comes to accumulating your financial records and making sure you're accounting for every transaction. So I think that's hugely important. Now, later, you definitely should get the bank account and the credit card in the name of your business. Okay. But at first, just keeping that separation between your personal expenses and your business expenses is very important.
Okay, that's kind of a relief to hear, because I know a lot of Etsy sellers start selling on the platform as they're migrating out of their hobby, or they want to see if their hobby really has legs to earn an income for them. So what if someone does that, doesn't go ahead and set up accounts and credit cards in their business name? They do exactly what you've just described and don't make it on Etsy. Like whatever they try to do is not successful. Do they still need to report that as income, whatever they got during that time that they were trying out selling online?
Well, yes, this is where keeping it separate is important, whether you're really a business or a hobby, because actually the IRS requires you to report your hobby income as well. You can't just say, this is a hobby, I don't have to report this income. Hobby income has to be reported on your tax return as well. So regardless of if you know it's going to work or not, or be sustainable, you should really start that separation at the beginning, because you will need to report that hobby income or business income, whichever it turns out to be. Now, you can take your hobby expenses as well, just like you can take your business expenses if you're a business, but you can only take hobby expenses up to your hobby revenue. So if you only made $2,000 in hobby income, you can only deduct $2,000 worth of expenses for the hobby.
I see. Okay.
Whereas a business, so there's a couple rules like going on here. Maybe I'll just dive into this since we're on this topic, if you don't mind.
No.
Stop me if you want. But if you enter into something like this with the intention of making a profit, then you really are a business.
Okay.
Now, if you're just really opening your Etsy shop and you're selling off a collection, and you're really not doing this to make a profit, you're just kind of getting rid of your stuff and then you'll be closing down the shop. Okay, well then maybe that is just a little hobby Etsy shop. But most people obviously start an Etsy shop for the purpose of making a profit. Yeah. So you really are a business from the beginning, whether mentally you're viewing yourself that way or not.
Yes. Okay. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, at this point, I assume someone is listening and thinking, okay, I need to talk to Sarah. I might have gone about this the wrong way. Before we dive more into the other accounting related questions, can we talk about small business, Sarah, just a little bit, and specifically what services you provide or you offer to clients who want to work with you?
Okay. I'm just starting up my services again. I had taken a break from the service aspect of things for a couple of years. I've done bookkeeping in the past for various clients, but my youngest is going to be in full day school next year. So it's the the perfect time to add some bookkeeping clients to my docket once again. But basically, I have three services right now that I'm offering. One, which I think could be helpful for a lot of people, is just kind of like my getting started package, where right now with the accounting programs, like I mentioned, once you get started, they memorize so many transactions for you. Once you've put them in once, it remembers things. And ongoing bookkeeping can be actually like a breeze. So with the Getting Started service, I basically help you pick your accounting software that's the right fit for you. We have a Skype phone call to talk about things. Then I set up your accounts. I customize them to your business so that when you look at your financial statements, they actually make sense to you. And then I code some transactions. I assign expenses to the right categories so that I get the accounting program memorizing and recognizing transactions, which makes your job a lot easier going forward. And then we have another Skype chat to walk you through your program and how to do things going forward. And really, I think that's what most small business owners probably need. They just need like that tiny bit of help at the beginning, and then they'll realize it's a lot easier than they think, and they can keep going on their own and do a great job. But then for people who have more complicated situations, I can do full service bookkeeping and a little bit of consulting too. If people just need a little bit of help in a certain area or need to brainstorm ways to increase their profits or decrease their expenses, I'm available for that too.
Okay. And Sarah, do you specialize only in Etsy shop business? Well, people who run Etsy shops or creative businesses or selling online or any type of small business. So if someone is doing something else in addition to Etsy.
Any type of small business I can help with. I've done bookkeeping for coffee shops before. I've done books for a speech therapist before. Of course, I do my own Etsy shop bookkeeping. So a wide variety of small businesses I can be of help with. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. It's like now you're in your element because this is like what you trained to do. Did you ever at some point think that maybe accounting wasn't for? I know I'm kind of going off topic, but because I train as a pharmacist, and there are some times where I'm actually a clinical pharmacist by training, and there's some times when I'm just like, oh, I just want to be a pharmacist for the rest of my life because I really love it. I love medications. I love talking about medications. I can bore you to death just talking about, what a drug does and why it's, why you're responding the way you are. And then other times I'm like, okay, the creative side of my brain takes over. I'm like, okay, I need to make something with my hands and do something else. Do you ever have those as just being a creative person too?
I think right now I'm kind of living the best of both worlds because I do really like accounting.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. It makes sense to me. I like doing books. I like spreadsheets. I like looking at financial statements. It works for me. I was always really glad that I picked accounting as my major. There was never a moment of, is this the right fit for me? But having my own Etsy shop and my website, writing the ebooks, it allows me to do things other than just accounting and bookkeeping. So right now it's a great balance because especially with the kids, I can do things during the day when they're in school and it works out fantastic.
Oh, good. Now let's talk about your ebooks because you have some that are specifically for Etsy sellers, but then others as well. Can we just talk about those too? And I'm so impressed that you have, I think there are 5 ebooks that you've written, which I think is impressive because I know it takes time to create a quality product. So I'm impressed. So which one would you say for someone listening right now do you think would be most relevant, especially if they're muddling through trying to get their accounting situation straightened out as far as their business?
Well, I think my Etsy seller's simple guide to taxes would be the place to start. I tried to make that as comprehensive as I could about business formation, registering your business, picking an entity type, then walking people through the tax form that you'll file, what all the different lines mean, common tax deductions. I really tried to make that a comprehensive book. And my blogger's Simple Guide to Taxes ebook is pretty much the same, except that my blogger's tax guide has some blogging examples that are unique to bloggers. And then my Etsy tax guide has examples that are unique to Etsy sellers, such as cost of goods sold and inventory and things like that a blogger would not have to address. So I would definitely start with the Etsy tax guide, and it's on Amazon or in my Etsy shop as well.
Okay. And I will link to both, of course, Sarah's shop on smallbusinesssarah.com, which I think will direct anyone who wants to buy those to Amazon, and then your Etsy shop as well, so they have easy access to get to those.
Thanks.
So I think now I will ask some of the questions that came from the Etsy Conversations community regarding accounting and taxes. And the first question is from Ren Brown. She runs the Etsy shop Mad Party. And I have to give Ren some credit for this because for a while I had made up my mind to invite you back to the podcast. And then she started a conversation within the Facebook group about accounting systems that people were using. And that triggered in my mind having you back. And so that was what spurred me coming back to ask again, oh, Sarah, can you please be my guest? And so thank you, Ren, for...
Thank you, Ren.
Yes, for making this happen. So Ren's first question is, can I do my own bookkeeping? And what are the first steps I can be taking towards climbing this accounting mountain?
I like that, accounting mountain.
Yes.
I definitely think you can do your own bookkeeping. Of course, every business can come to the point where they're just ginormous and really could use some help. But I think for most Etsy sellers, they're probably at a level where they can definitely handle their own bookkeeping. And I think it's actually important to try and handle your own bookkeeping if you can, because the more involved you are in your financials and seeing those expenses come through, seeing that revenue, just the better you can do at managing your shop. So I definitely think that you can. And there's 3 accounting softwares, if this is the right place to talk about this,
yes,
Ijama.
For sure.
Okay. There's 3 accounting softwares I recently tested to see what I thought about each one and what I thought about them in regard to Etsy sellers specifically, after you had invited me on the podcast. So we all know that QuickBooks for Etsy is a new thing that Etsy is promoting.
Yes.
So I wanted to test that. And then a lot of Etsy sellers rave about GoDaddy. So I wanted to test GoDaddy. And then I personally use QuickBooks Simple Start. And so I was already using that. So I wanted to add that to my comparison. And just so you know, QuickBooks Simple Start is a completely different program than QuickBooks for Etsy. I was surprised by that.
Really?
Yeah, QuickBooks for Etsy, it's the same company,
Yeah.
but a very, very different product.
Okay.
QuickBooks for Etsy actually uses a new program called QuickBooks Self-Employed.
Yes.
So anybody could go to their website and find QuickBooks Self-Employed, and that's what it runs for QuickBooks for Etsy.
Okay.
And so I was really excited about this. Could this be great? I love QuickBooks. QuickBooks for Etsy sounds wonderful. Unfortunately,
Oh,
I am really not impressed with QuickBooks for Etsy.
really?
And I mean majorly not impressed.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the problem with QuickBooks for Etsy. So the idea with having an accounting software that links to your Etsy shop is that all of the detail will come through for you. So on the Etsy bill, how it's split out into its various components, that comes through at a detail level. And then same with sales. That would be the advantage of an accounting program that links to your Etsy shop.
Right.
So QuickBooks for Etsy brings through the detail of your Etsy bill. So the expenses, it does bring through that detail. Okay, that's great. But on the revenue side, it completely falls short.
Really?
It only breaks out. So in a transaction in your Etsy shop, you would have the sale of the product. You would have the portion of shipping income that the person paid for shipping.
Yeah.
You would have any sales tax that the person paid. And then you would have less the fee, the transaction fee.
Yeah.
Well, the only breakout in QuickBooks for Etsy that you get is it breaks out the transaction fee, and then everything else is lumped together. You don't get the breakout of shipping income, and you don't get the breakout of sales tax. And because of the way the program is set up, it's a very low functioning version of QuickBooks. There is no way to track sales tax within QuickBooks for Etsy. I looked up sales tax QuickBooks for Etsy in the help section and in QuickBooks Self-Employed.
Yeah.
They do not do anything with sales tax. And you cannot make manual adjustments within QuickBooks for Etsy. You can't add something in on your own like you can with most other accounting programs.
Yeah.
So you have no way to track your sales tax or to break out that shipping income within that program. So it's unfortunately I was not too impressed with QuickBooks.
No. So Sarah, if somebody is using QuickBooks for Etsy right now, and this is obviously an issue because as sellers we have to pay sales tax when on items we sell. what's the best way right now somebody who's using that particular product can remedy that situation? Would you recommend just manually keeping track of sales tax and shipping in Excel format, as cumbersome as that might be, or how would you handle it if you just found this out?
I think you're right that the manual process would be the only way that you could go, and you can pull up that CSV file within your shop payment account to, I think it's the orders one, and it'll show you your sales tax and your shipping. And I think that would be the way to go. And you could track that on, it'd have to be on a spreadsheet because you won't even be able to add that to the program.
Right. Okay. Well, that's not good news.
No, it's really not. I was bummed.
Yeah, I wonder why. Well, I mean, I don't think there's any point questioning it because we don't know why per se, but that seems like a really major shortcoming because we have to pay sales tax. And so it's important to know what that number is when tax filing time comes.
And on your tax return, I think usually you break out shipping income separate from like your sales income. So that's, that's another important portion just for decision making. How much am I charging for shipping? What am I getting in? And then what am I paying out? And what's that difference there? So yeah, it was disappointing.
Okay. So the cost of it is minimal. Do you think for the cost of the application or, the tool QuickBooks for Etsy, the downside being you still have to manually maintain some other accounting information, that price tag is worth it, bearing this in mind?
I would say no, because I think the introductory price is only $5 a month. But if I'm not mistaken, it goes up to $10 a month.
Yeah,
after
10 or 12, something like that.
And I'm pretty sure GoDaddy is regularly priced around $10 a month, and the QuickBooks Simple Start that I use is regularly priced at $15 a month. So really the cost, I wouldn't think that the cost should be a factor. I would pick probably either GoDaddy or the Simple Start, and we can discuss their merits if you like.
Okay, actually, let's do that. Which one do you want to touch on next?
Okay, we can talk about GoDaddy next.
Okay.
So tons of Etsy sellers use GoDaddy, and they love it.
Yeah. And
GoDaddy has a lot of good things going for it, and I think it is a fine choice for Etsy sellers. So GoDaddy, actually, when it connects with your Etsy account, it brings in all the detail, the Etsy bill detail, and all the revenue detail.
Okay.
So that first initial problem is already solved. It brings in all the detail you want. You can track sales tax within GoDaddy. You can run income reports. It connects with your bank account. It can connect with your credit card. So tons of good things going on for GoDaddy. As an accountant, the thing I don't love about GoDaddy, and this could definitely be me coming from my accounting background, in accounting, it normally functions on like what's called a double entry accounting system, where every entry has two parts. And I won't go into too much detail there, but GoDaddy basically functions on a single entry accounting system. So what happens when you have that going on is there's a much greater chance for errors, because you're only accounting for one side of the entry, the profit and loss side, and you're not really accounting for the balance sheet side. So your cash accounts and your receivables, payables, things like that.
Okay.
So GoDaddy, the feature that they're lacking because of the way they're set up is you can't do account reconciliations. Like you can't reconcile your cash. You can't reconcile your credit card every month. And bank and account reconciliations is a hallmark of good accounting practices, because that's where you catch your errors.
Okay.
That's where you discover, oh, that got counted twice. That's why my reconciliation doesn't balance. Or, oh, I forgot that was an error. I can add that, and now I balance. So GoDaddy is so great in a lot of ways. It brings in that detail from Etsy. It links to your bank account. It tracks sales tax. It shows you shipping income. But as an accountant, that lack of reconciliation just makes me nervous. And they have other features. You can track mileage. You can track time.
Yeah.
You can send invoices. So, I mean, it has a lot of great things there. And for Etsy sellers, the bringing in of the detail does make it super easy within GoDaddy.
Okay, so with this one flaw, which makes you nervous, and anything that makes an accountant nervous makes me nervous, because where money is concerned, you don't want there to be any nervousness. What do you suggest would be a good way for someone who is already using this particular tool for their accounting to not accommodate, but to make up for this? Is there something that an end user can do just to cover all their bases?
Oh, that's a tough question, Ujama. I suppose you could probably figure out a way to do a manual reconciliation process, which I think would be a bit more time consuming.
Okay.
I think on the entering of things and the recording transactions, you just need to be super careful, especially when you're setting up GoDaddy, because they're linking to your Etsy shop and they're linking to your bank account. At the beginning, you'll find some double counting of transactions. For instance, they already brought in your Etsy sale, and the shipping and the sales tax, but then your bank account deposited your weekly deposit from your payment account. Now, they have a setting within GoDaddy where you can, you would click on that deposit to your bank account, and I think it's called like non-accounting or double counting. They have a system where you can mark that transaction that would be double counting it, and it won't include it in your books. So they have a method for handling things like that, but you have to pay attention and know that that's happening. There.
Okay.
Right. Same thing on your Etsy bill. So they're already, as it's happening, they bring in the Etsy bill detail as you renew a listing and as you pay for advertising. But then when your Etsy bill hits your credit card as, one lump sum of a couple $100, that would be double counting everything that's already been brought in. So you have to make sure that you select that, okay, this is non-accounting or double counting, and then it'll eliminate it. And it does remember that going forward. So each month you don't have to remember to do that. It memorizes transactions like that, which is great. But if you are a non-accounting person and you don't know that there's this risk of double counting, basically your numbers could be very much inflated if you weren't paying attention to this.
Okay. So in this case, you as the seller, or I shouldn't say me as the seller, would actually be losing out because I would be over-reporting.
Yeah, your income would be over-reported and your expenses would be over-reported.
Okay, all right. Now, just as an aside, and one of the reasons I wanted to ask is because I do know a lot of Etsy sellers use GoDaddy for accounting. So just in case somebody wasn't aware, it's good now to know. How bad would it be, or how much trouble could one get into for these issues that, that they might innocently not have been aware of if, say, the IRS finds out before they do?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, because it could happen, your swing could happen either way. You could end up paying more in taxes than you were supposed to, or less in taxes than you were supposed to, depending on, which direction. Most likely it would be more, let's see, most likely you would have more extra revenue booked than expenses booked. So you could end up paying more in taxes. So in that case, you wouldn't be in trouble with the IRS,
Right.
I guess.
Because you gave them more than you should have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's assuming you've got a profitable Etsy shop.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, obviously the IRS can invoke penalties and interest on payments, whether you made the error on purpose or not. Okay. And this isn't like purposefully committing fraud. You're actually using an accounting program. Yeah. And I don't want to talk too badly on GoDaddy because, like I said, it does have tons of great features in it. And Etsy sellers I know and trust, very meticulous Etsy sellers, use GoDaddy and are very happy with it. Okay. Going in, I think if you know some of these concerns, I think that'll set you off on the right foot for using GoDaddy appropriately. Okay, good.
And I thank you for mentioning that because yes, I think I want people to have just a full what's the word? Knowledge, more holistic view going in. And like you said, because it does so much and it is so good and so many other people are using it successfully, I think it's just a matter of knowing what the shortcomings are and making accommodations for that just to make sure all your bases are covered. So that's not to say that it shouldn't be used or anything. I hope no one interprets it that way.
Right. I think GoDaddy is a legitimate choice for Etsy sellers. Yeah. QuickBooks for Etsy, I would put in the not legitimate choice. Okay. Which leads me to the second legitimate choice I feel for Etsy sellers would be the regular QuickBooks, the QuickBooks Simple Start, which costs $15 a month regularly. Okay. Now, the good things that are going for QuickBooks Simple Start, and this is an online program as well, is it's actually true accounting software. It has double entry accounting. It has reconciliations. It has journal entry capabilities. It's an accountant's software, but it's easy enough to use for everybody. Okay. At least in my opinion. And it links to your bank accounts and it links to your credit cards. So all of those transactions come in automatically. So for Etsy sellers, where they might not like QuickBooks Simple Start is that it doesn't link with your Etsy account. And I double checked this like 1,000 times because I was like, well, if they have QuickBooks for Etsy, then why can't my better version of QuickBooks link with my Etsy account? And it just doesn't. I called the support line. Maybe the person didn't know what they were talking about. They said no. I looked in their apps. No. There is like a really high-priced app you can add on that will link with your Etsy shop, but it's like really expensive. It would be like not worth it. Okay. So the way to overcome this lack of detail from your Etsy shop that you won't get automatically imported into QuickBooks Simple Start is to just make a couple adjustments every month. Okay. And so for me, these adjustments are like second nature, but I understand that for non-accountants, they would be scary. Yeah. So I actually made 2 tutorial videos, which I have on my YouTube channel, and also they're linked to on all of this information on the 3 different accounting programs for Etsy sellers. I compiled into a pretty lengthy post about the pros and the cons of each and compared them, and I linked the videos into that post.
And sorry, Sarah, is this post on smallbusinesssarah.com?
Yes.
What's the title of the post? Yeah, if you can, I will link to it so that people can easily find it. But can you just tell us the title too, in case someone is listening and wants to jump on right now?
Yes, I think it was the best accounting software for Etsy sellers. And I actually have an Etsy sellers start here page that you can see at the top
Yes.
of my website. And then that article will be on that page too.
Okay, perfect.
So basically the Etsy bill part of splitting out the transactions within QuickBooks Simple Start is really super simple. You just kind of split out that one credit card transaction, that, $300 Etsy bill that hits your credit card on the first of the month.
Mm-hmm.
You just basically do a drop down menu, select what accounts you want it to go to based on your Etsy bill, and you're done. It's really easy. The revenue side, splitting that out, breaking out the sales tax,
Mm-hmm.
breaking out the shipping income, is a tiny bit trickier. But I know if you follow the video, it outlines exactly how to do that.
Okay. All right. And so once someone gets set up with QuickBooks Simple Start, again, just to be clear, this is something they would have to do once a month just to reconcile all their books and make sure everything is where it should be. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So once a month, you'll do your Etsy bill breakout.
Okay.
And then once a month, you'll do the entry to adjust your revenue and split that out. And it'll take you a couple of minutes a month. So Etsy or QuickBooks Simple Start, I feel like, is a great choice for Etsy sellers because it is a genuine accounting program. Mm-hmm. It can grow with your business. Okay. It has you can add on advanced features if your business grows. Mm-hmm. But I realize that adjustment issue could be a major drawback for somebody. So that's why I think you have to weigh the two, really, between GoDaddy and QuickBooks Simple Start. There's some pros, there's some cons. You just kind of have to make the choice that's right for you.
Right. And yes, I was going to say something similar. Like with both, you recommend them both. But
I do.
With
Mm-hmm.
each one, there's still going to be some work that mm-hmm. we would have to do depending on the one we select. And for an individual, it would just depend on what you're comfortable with doing.
Yes.
at
mm-hmm.
the end or beginning or whenever, once a month when you have to do some sort of reconciliation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow, that's very eye-opening, Sarah, because I think a lot of Etsy sellers thought that the QuickBooks for Etsy was, like this, wonderful time saver and that it would, handle all their accounting. But especially with Etsy, I think there's a lot more to keeping track of accounting for Etsy than I think most sellers realize, at least initially. And mm-hmm. If this particular product falls short, not to be negative or anything, but when it comes to your business, you want to make sure that everything is falling in line and in place as it should be. So perhaps the solution that Etsy is offering its sellers might not necessarily be the best one. Maybe a good start, or well, maybe not good, but maybe a what's the word? I'm trying to think of
like a stopgap or something.
Yeah.
A very temporary solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I might put it as one step above keeping an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe. I don't know. I know. And I don't want to be this negative too. I was excited, but I really think that QuickBooks could have done a better job with whatever this partnership was between Etsy and QuickBooks. I just wonder how closely they were looking at this product and how it would help Etsy sellers. And I do think product sales, it is slightly harder accounting. It is because you've got the product and the taxes and the shipping. Blog accounting is definitely just a little bit easier, or if you just have a website or something like that. There is like a complication level when you're selling products and accounting for that in your accounting software.
Okay. And then there's also services, because sometimes part of the offerings that some people who run Etsy shops give is service. And by that, I mean, I know some sellers do workshops where they teach people classes. I had Marie Segaris on the podcast a while ago, and she talked about, because she's a yarn artist, so she does crochet and knitting. And so she talked about growing your business by teaching in-person classes and workshops. And so there's that element to it as well. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like QuickBooks for Etsy might not be able to handle accounting for that type of service being offered as part of one's creative business.
Yeah, I think it would be very limited. Okay. You could always do... So it seems like with the service, the invoicing factor is what you want. And you could always do invoicing through PayPal. That works great. But GoDaddy and QuickBooks Simple Start have invoicing built right in. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think QuickBooks for Etsy did. But I could be mistaken on that.
Okay. Thank you so much for that synopsis of each one. I think that's very helpful. And I think anyone who is still on the fence about making a decision about what product to use has some good information now to arm them to make an informed decision. Of course, you can always go and read up more on each of the individual companies' websites. I'll link to those as well. So if there's something we perhaps didn't touch on and you had a question that neither of us has maybe mentioned, you can read up more on those products.
I'm happy to, just in case too, I'm happy to answer questions by email as well, because right now I'm signed up for all three services. I'm paying the monthly fee for all three. So I can, hop in to see if people have a specific question, because sometimes you don't know until you dive into the program.
That's so true. Does.
So that's why I'm signed up for all three right now. So
Sarah, how long are you going to stay signed up?
I don't know.
Because I'm imagining somebody will hear this 3 months after we've recorded it, and I might want to reach out to you. So,
well, maybe I'll have to keep it as just a long-term business expense that I've got to stay signed up.
Yeah, you just might. And how would you like people to contact you if they do have questions?
You can just contact me, smallbusinesssarah@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. And I will put that in the show notes as well, but I think that's easy to remember too.
Hopefully.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. What steps do I need to take to officially transform my hobby into a legitimate small business? I think so many Etsy sellers have this question as well.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit earlier.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, so you can kind of be hobbyish for a little bit at first, but really with the intention of earning a profit, you are a business, a small business. And business formation actually happens at the state level. So you would go on your state website and figure things out. The most common type of small business formation is just a sole proprietorship, and it's very easy to start. The hardest part is just going to be navigating your state website, because as a rule, I think state websites are terrible and hard to navigate.
Yes.
So that'll be the hardest part, is just figuring out what forms you would have to file to become a sole proprietorship in your state, apply to collect and remit sales tax, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then once you've done that, at the end of the year, when you get ready to file your federal taxes as a sole proprietorship, or another option is a single member LLC, that's the other more popular choice. Mm-hmm. You just make sure you file a Schedule C along with your IRS taxes, and at the top there'll be a little checkbox that you mark that you're a new business. And now the IRS now also knows that you are a new business, and you're good to go.
Okay. It sounds simple and straightforward, which it really is. But like you said, I recently had to do all this, and navigating through state websites to get the right forms to the right places and in the right order.
Hardest part.
That's the hardest part. Yes.
And every state is different.
Yes.
the forms themselves are usually a piece of cake to fill out,
Yeah.
but it's finding the right form.
Finding the right form. Yes, I know. And they're typically like 1 or 2 pages. The most I saw was 4 pages, one of which was just instructions. But yeah, the hard part is just figuring it all out. And if you want to be sure you don't make any mistakes, it's a good idea, if you can afford it, to either, I know some accountants will do it, and I know some lawyers will help you set up your business as well. So there are some professionals out there who can do that for you. It will cost you, but it might also give you some peace of mind, just knowing that somebody who knows how to navigate the system is doing it for you and helping you along the way. I mean, you'll have to do things like sign papers and whatnot, but that's another option if you just don't want to try and figure it out yourself.
For sure.
Okay. So next question. Where was I? How do I know? Okay, I think we kind of touched on this. I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
How do I know if my shop needs to even file taxes? And does the government set a limit to the amount of sales you can make that will take you from a quote hobby to a business?
Yeah, this is a common question. Like, is there a dollar threshold?
Yeah.
And I wish that there was, because sometimes you just want to be a very small business and not have to deal with all these forms and things like that. A lot of people, you may have heard that this like $400 profit threshold, and that's like the self-employed threshold.
Yeah, I heard 6.
Okay. Oh, 600. Maybe I got the figure wrong. And while it's true that that's the threshold for when you will begin to pay self-employment taxes on your federal return, there is no such threshold for when you have to actually start filing as a business and filing a Schedule C. It's a common misconception. The federal government does not say, well, you don't have to file your Schedule C until you make that $600 profit. That's when your extra tax will kick in, when your profit reaches that level. But like we said before, they want you to report hobby income.
Yes.
And they for sure want you to report your business income, no matter what dollar value your profit is.
Okay. So the bottom line is, if you're selling and you're getting an income from your sales, whether or not you're profitable, you owe the government taxes.
Yeah, they want everything.
Yes. Okay. Well, that clears that one up, because I know I believed that, and I think I was confused, like a lot of other people too. I thought, okay, that 600 or 400, I don't know what the number is, but I did hear a number in the hundreds too, that you didn't have to pay taxes till you reached that threshold. But you've cleared that up. That's really not what it is.
No.
All right. Okay. Next question. Well, we talked about this already in depth, so I'll just read it, but we'll move to the next one after that. It was, what bookkeeping software / apps do you recommend? And I think we've touched on that in detail. But I do have a question about bookkeeping. So if someone uses one of the software products that you recommended for keeping track of their accounting, do we still need to have a bookkeeper, like someone to help us keep our books, or does the software replace what a traditional bookkeeper would be doing for us?
I think the software really replaces that, unless I think you'll know once you get into the accounting program and you start using it. If you feel like you know what you're doing, you're coding your transactions and it's easy, and each program runs a profit and loss report, and that's what you're going to use to find the numbers that you're going to put on your tax return. So if you're moving and grooving and everything is looking right, you really don't need to hire a bookkeeper. It used to be much harder to do this bookkeeping stuff before the automatic linking in of your bank accounts and your credit cards. And before the memorized transactions and things like that. But they've really eliminated a lot of that unknown element and have made it pretty simple. So if you're feeling comfortable about what you're doing, then keep going on your own. You don't have to hire outside help unless you're confused.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I do have another question.
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes we tend to talk about all these products and assume that everyone listening is in the US, but I know for a fact that that's not true. Will these software applications that we've talked about work for sellers who are outside of the US?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay.
I would assume that they might, or they could have international versions, but to be honest, I'm really not sure. But you're right. We get so US centric thinking that we forget to think about the needs of the international community.
Yes. Yeah. And I wonder if the QuickBooks for Etsy, well, my assumption is that because it's so basic, it won't matter where an individual is based to use that particular product. And then also tax regulations vary from country to country. So
yes, this is definitely US tax advice here.
Okay. All right. So if you're outside of the US, unfortunately, we don't know for sure if all this will apply to you. I can do some digging on the websites, which I will link to as well, to see if they make any accommodations for international businesses or businesses that are not based in the US. Okay. And so the last submitted question was, Sarah, do you have any recommendations on where we can find good bookkeeping printables?
Oh, I saw that question, and unfortunately, I don't. Maybe if that person had an idea of what they're looking for, like specific bookkeeping printables.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I gravitate to just using a software instead of doing things pencil and paper.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I don't have a good printables recommendation for that.
Well, that gives me an idea for someone who does have an accounting background and might want to get into the printables market on Etsy.
That's right.
Now, Sarah, back to you, just as a fellow business owner. How do you manage your time when it comes to running your business? And especially since you run what's a service-based business in addition to selling on Etsy. What do you do? Do you have tools that you use to help you stay organized? How do you handle all that?
I'm a big fan of time blocking. Mm-hmm. So this past year, my son was in afternoon kindergarten. So I really tried to restrict my time that I work on my business to the afternoon when then all three of my kids were at school at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I tend to kind of batch tasks together. So sometimes it's a whole week where I'm doing nothing but working on the website, or sometimes it's day by day. This is an Etsy day. This is a book writing day. This is a bookkeeping day. This is a website day. It can kind of vary depending on the magnitude of the project I'm working on. But I definitely try to stay focused during those afternoon hours and group like-minded things together.
Okay.
I just find I'm much more productive that way.
Okay. I like the idea of time blocking because it sounds like it helps you just stay mentally focused on, like you said, on what you're working on at that time or that day.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Do you have any specific tips or advice for Etsy sellers to grow as creative business owners?
Well, my specific tip is definitely still financial related, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. I would say, and these two things are related, pay attention to your expenses. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people focus on the revenue. They focus on how many sales they're making and how many orders they've got and the cash coming in. But then it's really easy to neglect, well, how much cash is going out? What am I having to spend per product? What are some recurring services I've signed up for that I'm just not using that are costing me $5, $10 every month? So I think paying attention to your expenses is pretty important, because expenses can add up pretty quickly before you know it.
Yes, that's so true. It's so true.
And then related to that, and I've definitely been guilty of this in the past, is not overbuying on inventory when you're creating a new product. So many times in the past, I've thought I had a great idea for a product. And so, of course, you're trying to get the best unit cost per item, per raw material. So you end up buying hundreds of some sort of item, and then you make the product and you hate it, or your customers hate it, and then you're left with so much extra stuff you don't know what to do with, and it costs so much money. So at first, even if the first couple items you make aren't going to be at a profit because you're testing the idea, just buy a couple to make the initial item. Just buy a little bit of raw materials, even if you have to pay more for it. Test the idea, and then go find the wholesale raw materials to bring your costs down. So those would be my two pieces of advice.
Sarah, I feel like you found two of the major mistakes I have made, and those were the two you picked. Because yes, in the beginning, you just look at the money that's coming in and you're like, yes, I'm making money. But, I would always forget that I was spending money to make that money. And, I wasn't really making a profit. And then also, overbuying. If I could take a picture and show how many mistakes I've made when I thought something was going to be it, and it wasn't. People didn't love it as much as I thought they would in my head.
Totally been there.
And that's when you have to have a destashing sale. Like, okay, well, it was a mistake.
That's right.
Sarah, thank you so much. I've so enjoyed talking with you again. I'm such a fan of what you and your sister were doing, and now what you're doing. I think it's so great. I think the information that you shared is so valuable. Your website is so helpful. It's smallbusinesssarah.com. I'm going to link to it. If you want to read up some of Sarah's articles or reach out to her, you can reach her. Again, her email is smallbusinesssarah@gmail.com. I will put that in the show notes for this episode. And Sarah, I thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really had a great time.
Oh, good. And you're welcome. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I will be back again next week.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.